Hello everybody, and welcome to a gameplay breakdown video. Now, this game was a very interesting one. It was very short, but it featured some very interesting decisions, and so I wanted to highlight it here and really go over the kind of high-level strategy that you can be thinking about in your own games so that you can improve and get to that next level. Now, the important cards in this game that I wanted to highlight is first of all Silverbolt for my opponent on turn 1 they played it. It's a 1-mana artifact that you can pay 3 and tap, sacrifice it to deal 3 to any target, and if it's a wolf or a werewolf, then that target is going to just die no matter what, even if it has more than 3 toughness. Now, the other key card that I have access to is Might of the Old Ways, which is 1 and a green for a +2/+2 combat trick that, if I have Coven enabled, will draw me a card. And so the reason why this is the key interaction of the game is because if I can somehow use Might of the Old Ways to buff a creature out of the 3 toughness range when my opponent is using Silverbolt on it, I am going to be very favored to win the game, because not only have they wasted all of the mana that goes into Silverbolt, they also haven't killed anything, and if I can draw a card off of Might of the Old Ways to boot, then I'm going to be ending up getting like a 3-for-1 for my Might of the Old Ways if I'm winning a combat with it, or even just a straight up 2-for-1, which should be good enough to win in a lot of games. The key card that I have in play right now is Pestilent Wolf, which is a wolf, so I can't use the Might of the Old Ways trick on that card because Silverbolt is going to kill it no matter what. So this whole game is really just revolving around the fact that I want to blank my opponent's Silverbolt, but I can't do that with Pestilent Wolf, and so I have to try and get them to use their Silverbolt onto one of my other creatures. So we start off the opponent's turn. On their turn, they end up playing a Swamp and a Siege Zombie, so they have both cards of the same color, which could mean that they are color screwed or that they're just like waiting on playing their third color. I make this attack here because Siege Zombie is just widely considered to be better than Pestilent Wolf, and also because, as I said earlier, I don't really want to have the Silverbolt targeting my Pestilent Wolf. I'd rather have it target my other creatures so that I can use Might of the Old Ways to blank their spell. So I offer this trade here. I don't really expect them to accept the trade because Siege Zombie is a better card. Now, I do have a Timberland Guide in my hand, which is 1 and a green for a 1/1 that when it enters play can put a counter onto target creature, and there is some potential logic in some situations to using the Timberland Guide to put a counter onto the Pestilent Wolf, make it a 3/3 and attack in. However, because my opponent has the Silverbolt, that just presents them with an easy target, and they'll just take out my 3/3. I'll be left with a 1/1 against their 2/2, and I'll be behind on board. So I just offer this trade, pretty confident that they are not going to accept it, and then I play Timberland Guide post-combat as another 2/2. So this is a prime target for me to try and use to have them use Silverbolt on the Timberland Guide, and then I can use Might of the Old Ways to blow it out. However, currently, I don't have any reason for them to want to use their Silverbolt on Timberland Guide instead of Pestilent Wolf, because Pestilent Wolf is just straight up better now that it is in play, because it has this extra activated ability of 2 and a green to give itself Death Touch. So Timberland Guide is currently not going to be targeted by this Silverbolt. My opponent plays a Swamp, which means that maybe they're color screwed, because at this point in the game you'd expect them to have both colors in play, and they attack, which is kind of fair if they aren't planning on blocking because they still think their Siege Zombie's better. They're probably planning on using Silverbolt this turn, and so at this point in the game, I'm not going to block because I'm kind of being an aggressive strategy right now, and I want to keep as many creatures in play as possible so I can maybe enable the Coven on my Might of the Old Ways. So here we go. I just decide not to block, and we move on to my turn. Now, in many situations, if my opponent is planning on using Silverbolt, they should use it now, because if I have a combat trick, then they aren't going to want to fall into it, because if I use Might of the Old Ways to blow out their Silverbolt, then I kind of end up relatively far ahead. And if my opponent is going to use Silverbolt, they should probably use it on the Pestilent Wolf, because the Pestilent Wolf is a better target because it has the activated ability to get Death Touch. So my opponent can either wait until my turn and then use Silverbolt on my Pestilent Wolf, or they can use Silverbolt now on my Pestilent Wolf. And in their perspective, that doesn't really change anything. However, on my turn, I draw my card and I draw another Timberland Guide, which is a very key draw because it enables me to make my targets slightly different from my opponent, because currently they're going to use Silverbolt on Pestilent Wolf. It's the same as if they did it on their turn or my turn. However, when I play this Timberland Guide, I can all of a sudden make my other Timberland Guide look like a much more appealing target. And one thing that my opponent should be thinking about in this situation is, why would I do this and make my Timberland Guide into a 3 toughness creature when I know they have Silverbolt and the mana to activate it? And so from my opponent's perspective, me having a combat trick, especially Might of the Old Ways, because that's the 2-mana green combat trick in this set, is something that should be kind of going through their head. And at this point in the game, if you're playing at this high level, like if you're playing against a Hall of Fame level player, I think they would probably put me on having Might of the Old Ways because I made this play. Because all of a sudden, I am kind of abandoning the strategy of equalizing all my creatures. The previous turn, I decided to make Timberland Guide a 2/2 instead of buffing up my Pestilent Wolf. This turn, I'm making my Timberland Guide into a 3/3, which just makes it a much more appealing target for the Silver Bolt. And so at this point, if my opponent is playing this game and thinking about it on a high level, they should be wondering, why did I make this Timberland Guide into a 3/3 instead of just making it into another 2/2 and keeping that Silver Bolt not having an appealing target? Because at this point, I'm making that Timberland Guide into a very, very juicy target. And so at this point, if they're going to use Silver Bolt, using it on Pestilent Wolf still probably is their best play, because it just means that they aren't going to outright lose the game. Because if they use it on Timberland Guide and I do have Might of the Old Ways, then they just end up super far behind, which is what ends up happening. They decide to use their Silver Bolt on my Timberland Guide. I use Might of the Old Ways to keep my creature alive, hit them for 5 damage. They go to 11. All of a sudden, I have a commanding board presence. I've gotten my 2-for-1. I still have both of my creatures. I got the Coven so I could draw a card. And all of a sudden, my opponent just basically can't, is so far behind that they just end up conceding the game. Maybe that's because they didn't have another land drop or something of that nature. But basically, it turned a game that was relatively winnable for my opponent into a game that was much more difficult for them to win. If they use it on my Pestilent Wolf, they're taking 3 damage. I'm not going to be able to use my Might of the Old Ways, so they're just taking 3 instead of taking 7. So they're going to be going, instead of being at 11, they'd be at 15 life. Maybe on their following turn, they can play another creature, and all of a sudden they have double blocks available for my Timberland Guide. I have a 3/3 and a 1/1 against maybe a couple of 2/2s, which isn't necessarily a conclusive victory for me. They have way more time to draw out of their potential mana screw, and instead of them just having to concede the game because I have a bunch of power worth of creatures in play, they are in a much more stable position. They have potential options, and they aren't just in a terrible spot. And so I think that this is a really interesting situation. I thought that the level of thinking, not only from as soon as my opponent played Silverbolt, and me having Might of the Old Ways, kind of that being my whole game plan, was to try and blank their Silverbolt with my Might of the Old Ways. My opponent's perspective of how can I maybe survive because they don't have their colors, or they need land drops, or things of that nature. And then maybe the idea of using removal during your own turn so you don't get messed up by your opponent's combat tricks being a significant factor as well. Anyway, if you did enjoy this little breakdown and want to see more like this in the future, let me know by hitting that like button and commenting in the comments section down below. And then if you did make it all the way to the end of this video, leave hashtag beating the bolt, because the whole key was managing to beat the bolt, and that is what I did. So let me know if you enjoyed this video and by leaving that hashtag in the comments below. Anyway, that is going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you next time.